Good day, Internet. This is Chavez and Valko, the key to your immigration solutions. I am Senior Associate Ben Hamilton, and with me, as always, is Associate Attorney Andrew Craven. Andrew, how you doing today?
Doing good, Ben. How are you?
I am doing awesome. And as always, when you see our smiling faces, we are here to talk about all things employment-based immigration. And today we're going to be talking about the upcoming H-1B cap season. So we're going to run through a little bit of the mechanics of it, how you register, and all of that. So if you're already on an H, this isn't for you. But hey, if you're out of the country looking to start work in the US, if you're maybe a student about to graduate, maybe you're already on OPT, this is the video for you. So let's jump right into it. H-1B cap season. Andrew, actually, what is the cap? Why do we even do this every year?
Broad level, basically, there's only 85,000 visas for the H-1B, for the fiscal year. So there's only 85,000 of these visas. Of course, there are a lot more applicants. So ultimately, what happens every year is that USCIS runs a lottery. So they get all of these petitions, and then they randomly select some for actual adjudication. What they did about 2 years ago was they started what's called a registration process. So basically, instead of completing the entire H-1B packet, getting everything together with all the filing fees and mailing that into USCIS, everyone just registers, goes through this process, and then after getting selected, those selected will petition for their H-1B employee.
So a couple of key points here. They only give out 85,000 new H-1Bs a year, right? So if you've already gotten an H-1B, you're not subject to the cap anymore. There's no issues with you filing an extension or changing employer. This is only for people that have never had an H-1B. There is a cap of 85,000 a year. And just for frame of reference, last year they received 309,000 registrations. So 309,000 registrations for 85,000 spots. That's why we have a lottery. Um, and why you're saying, well, why does it say fiscal year 2023? Well, that's because the fiscal year for the United States starts October 1st, right? So the fiscal year 2022 started back in October 2021 and runs through the end of September of 2022. So these visas that we're talking about now, this lottery that's going to be conducted here in a couple of months, it's for visas that are going to start in the fiscal year 2023, which is October 1st. So people sometimes get confused with the dates. So the first question, Andrew, is who registers then? So if we have to register, who registers? Can I register myself? Does my employer register me? Who registers?
So the company that is petitioning for the foreign national is actually who's going to do the registration. This is something that kind of throws some people off, but ultimately the company is who is filing this petition. They're saying, hey, I want to hire that guy, but he's a foreign national. We would like authorization to employ him. So ultimately, the individual is not petitioning for themselves.
I see this question pop up all the time. A lot of confusion. Like, well, where do I go to register? It's like, no, you don't go anywhere to register. You need to talk with your employer, and your employer will do it. So, and then where do they go to register?
So they're going to go to www.my.uscis.gov. So this is the website for your USCIS account, basically.
Yeah, so anybody can create a USCIS account, right? Any individual can create a USCIS account to file something, right? Or to potentially something that was already filed that they could go in, put in the receipt number and receive updates and notifications, right? So it's the same web page that everyone uses, but in this case, instead of an individual going in, creating an account, registering, it's an actual company goes in, creates an account and registers. And then, of course, they can then link, a company can link their account to an attorney. So then, if they're working with an attorney, the attorney can actually then go in and help prepare the registrations and actually submit them on behalf of the company. So then, What information is needed from me then? My company has decided to sponsor me. They're going to register me in the H-1B cap. Like, do they need my degrees and my transcripts and all of this information? What do they need from me in order to register?
So ultimately, all they're going to need from you is name, your gender, date of birth, country of birth, your nationality, passport number, and whether or not you have a US master's degree. Personally, I just want to see your passport and then any degrees that you have so that I can confirm all this information and upload it directly so that I know full legal name and everything exactly as it appears.
So it's actually not very much information. It's your passport and then a yes no question. Um, so again, you don't really need a lot. Maybe talk about this a little bit later, but the barrier to entry in regards to registration is very low. And of course, there's an argument that that's actually created a lot of problems, that maybe it's too low. But anyway, yep, basically your passport and a yes no. What is the registration period? So they open up a window in which the company can go in and do registrations because you can't actually register anybody right now. When is that period going to be?
Um, Pretty much all I can say is March. Back in 2020, it was March 1st to March 20th. 2021, it was March 9th to March 25th. And they haven't released specifically when they're going to open up and close registration, but just the general time frame, it's going to be the month of March.
And of course, USCIS always announces these things on their website. Also, if you sign up for their notifications and general newsletters and stuff, um, so we should be hearing about that in a couple of weeks. Um, is there a cost? Now, we're not talking about a cost to like paying an attorney to help out with this. Just saying, is there a cost on the MyUSCIS website that we have to pay in order to register?
Yes, so the filing fee is $10.
Oh my gosh, that's so much money.
I
Uh,
know it's steep, but I think most employers can afford it.
it's actually one of the again, coming back to one of the concerns with this whole registration scheme is that the barrier to entry might actually be too low. And that's why we've seen we've seen applications go from about 200,000 to over 300,000 since they started doing this registration thing. Anyway, when do they typically announce the results of the lottery? So if registration closes on March 20th, they're going to conduct a lottery shortly thereafter, and then they're going to announce the results. When does that typically take place?
Typically March 30th. I think last year I want to say it was a couple of days early, but because ultimately the applications start April 1st, so March 30th is their deadline to release the results of the lottery.
So, what are my odds that I'm going to get selected?
Not great. Generally, from what we've seen with the past numbers, say under 30%, maybe under 20% if registration significantly increased this year.
So again, before the registration scheme entered into practice 2 years ago, your odds of getting selected were between like 40 and 50%. Now it's under 30, and it could get even worse this year as we're just seeing the amount of registrations skyrocket, which of course reduces your odds. At least on the first round. You know, they've had multiple rounds the last couple of years, and your odds per round shift around. But just in the first round, your odds of getting selected are going down every year under this registration scheme. How how can I improve my odds? I mean, does it matter that, oh, I have an offer from Amazon or Facebook as opposed to like a small time employer, or I got a PhD versus a bachelor's degree, or I have a STEM degree versus a non-STEM degree. How do I improve my odds?
So this is actually a question a lot of people ask, and they got a lot of, but there's only two things that you can do. One, you can have a U.S. master's degree, and I do want to hyper emphasize U.S. master's degree. The cap only applies to those who have a degree from a U.S. institution. Or two, you can have multiple offers from different employers and therefore have multiple registrations. These are the only things. Outside of that, it is a completely random lottery.
Yes. So if you work for Facebook or Amazon, or you work for some tiny little startup, that does not impact your odds whatsoever. The reason the US Masters matters is because there's 85,000 visas available, but 20,000 of those are set aside for people with US Masters degrees. So ideally, what happens is that they run it all for the first 65, and then any masters that don't get selected get into the 20,000. So you kind of have two bites at the apple. Your odds are obviously better if you have a US Masters degree, because again, you're in competition for 85,000 visas as opposed to 65,000 if you don't have a US Master's degree. Now, the second way is the multiple registrations, and that's where all the controversy lies and all of the anger. And we're going to talk a little bit about a lawsuit, and in that, why has the registrations gone from 200,000 to over 300,000, or probably get up to 350 this year, maybe even higher? Well, it's because people realize that one employer can only register the same person one time. If the same employer registers somebody twice, they're going to reject both registrations, period. But there is no restriction on different employers registering the same person. Now, if I literally have 3 offers from 3 different companies for 3 different jobs and each registers me, that's perfectly legitimate, and it's going to improve your odds. The problem is, what we're seeing is you're having, someone who creates 20 shell companies, and then is registering the same person 20 times, but they don't have 20 positions, right? They've registered 20 times for what is technically the same position. And in many cases, they're charging the employee for it, which of course is highly illegal. The employee is not supposed to be paying any of these costs. And you're not supposed to have multiple registrations if they're not, in fact, separate positions. So the problem here is that, can you increase your odds through multiple registrations? Yes, but there are multiple registrations that are legitimate, and there are multiple registrations that are highly illegitimate. And that's where a lot of the fighting around this registration scheme is right now, is about the multiple registrations. It's nasty. And if you go like onto Reddit or Facebook and you start talking about it, people get very heated very fast. Okay, moving on. So March 30th has come. How do I know if I was selected?
So the government communicates it as clearly as they communicate anything. The employer and the attorney will receive an email stating we have taken action on your case, and the online status that you have to go to from there will change from being submitted to selected. Outside of that, there's no "you weren't selected" email. The initial email doesn't specify what's going on, just action taken.
Well, that's what I love, is like, as an attorney, I could have hundreds of registrations, which means I could get dozens of emails that say we have taken an action on your case, but it doesn't say we have taken on an action on your case for company ABC and their employee, John Doe. It doesn't say that. It just says, you're like, well, which case have you taken an action on? I don't know, but they've taken action on a case, and then you have to actually log in and scroll through all your cases to see, okay, who was selected, who was not selected. Obviously, they send out an email saying we've conducted the lottery, and they'll post it on all their social media. So you'll see, hey, we've conducted the lottery. And then, of course, you have to talk to your employer and the attorney to then go in and see if you were actually selected. And again, once a registration has been submitted, the status says submitted. When they've conducted the lottery, if you go back in and it says submitted still, then you weren't selected. It doesn't change to not selected. It either stays as submitted or changes to selected. And then, of course, right? You've been selected, and great. A lot of people would be like, well, why doesn't it say not selected? Well, we'll get into that in a second. But in general, you'll get an email saying there's been a change or an update. You log in and you'll see that it's been changed to selected. Well, again, the reason this happens is because they're not going to change it to not selected until they're officially done with the cap, meaning they've received 85,000 actual petitions. In 2020, they actually had to do a second round, and then they didn't officially close the cap until February. So people registered in March. They did the first lottery at the end of March, and it wasn't until February of the following year that they formally closed the cap. This year, for March 2021, they're probably not going to officially close it until the summer of 2022. And so it won't change to not selected until they're done with that year's selections. If I am selected, when do I apply? What's the
So between April 1st and June 30th is when your employer is going to then have to submit the petition after receiving the registration.
So in general, you get 90 days to submit your application. Now, something we should talk a little bit about here is some crazy things that have happened. That in 2020, for the first time ever, they did a second lottery. And then in this year, for the first time ever, they did a third lottery, right? It was wild. So let's just talk about this year, or fiscal year 2022, right? Which again, this happened in March 2021. When did they announce that there was a second lottery?
So they announced that around July 29th.
So from the time, so June 30th is when they essentially should have received all of the applications from the first lottery. So it took them about a month to kind of figure out, well, this is the amount we actually received, this is the amount we still need, and then actually do a second lottery. It took them about a month to kind of figure that out. And then what was the application period for the people that got selected in the second lottery at the end of July?
So it was from August 2nd to November 3rd.
And then they announced a third lottery. And when was that?
That was November 19th.
And then what was that application period?
So from November 22nd to February 23rd. So that's actually still ongoing.
Still ongoing. And here's the crazy thing. Is there a likelihood of a fourth lottery?
Going off of some of the numbers we've discussed, probably.
Yeah, we're thinking that the likelihood's actually relatively high that there'll be a small fourth lottery. And when do we think maybe that would happen if it happens?
Approximately March 7th. So, enough time for them to receive all the applications from the third lottery, enough time to realize that they still have not met the 85,000 visas that they're supposed to distribute. And that would be around when they start picking some more folks.
But what is wild is you could literally have people that are registering for this year's lottery and then find out they got selected in the last year's lottery a year later. I mean, it's wild. Here's the important thing, though. We talk about all these lotteries. They still all relate back to the registration that was done in March 2021. So I do see questions of like, well, I heard there's going to be a third lottery. How do I register for that? You can't, right? The second, third, fourth lotteries are all done based on the registrations they received in March. So you have to have gotten in then to be considered for the second, third, or fourth lottery. Another key thing is, again, why? Here's the number one question: well, why are they having so many lotteries? The simple answer is, well, they selected 85,000 people, but they didn't receive 85,000 applications. They selected 85,000 people, but then only got 60,000 applications. Right. So, well, then they had to go and select 25,000 in a second lottery. But then of those 25,000, they only got 15,000, actual applications received. So now, well, that means they need to select another 10,000. It just keeps going. And I think when we ran the numbers, we were thinking that there may be a fourth lottery of around I think it was like 3 to 5,000, maybe. Roughly, it'd be kind of small. And I guess, hey, Andrew, if this is such a highly coveted and sought after visa, why then would they have made 85,000 selections, but then I think they only got like 55,000. I think that was the actual number. Why did 30,000 people roughly not apply?
Most likely it's because exactly what you're talking about. Multiple registrations for one person, and then when you come to the point to apply, uh, there's all the filing fees that go with it. There's fraud fee, there's regular filing, there's the acquia. So all of a sudden your cost goes up. So you're not going to file multiple petitions for the one guy. You're going to file the one that actually you think will work and not do any for the other million
Yeah.
registrations that you filed from the start.
My favorite one was the tweet from a guy that was like, I got selected 12 times. Or no, I registered 12 times and got selected 8. So how many petitions do I send? And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're putting this like onto a public social media. But anyway, if that guy got selected 8 times, he's only going to submit 1 petition. So that means there was 7 selections that didn't receive an application, and then now are going to get recycled back into a second lottery. And so obviously we think it's the duplicate registrations that are the main reason for these second, third, fourth rounds.
I do just want to take 1 second to go back and underline, though, because like you said, all of these lotteries do run off of the initial registration. So just for everyone listening, by March, you really need to have hammered down if you have a job offer, who's going to be petitioning for you, who's going to be filing that registration, and make sure that it gets done on time. Because even though this can go on for over a year at this point, you still need to be in that initial registration to be considered.
Random question that I see pop up a lot in online forums. So employer A registered me. I didn't get selected. I then moved on to employer B or C. And I'm hearing about this, but then I did get selected. Can employer B or C then file for me because I got selected in the 3rd round?
Are you saying that this person already had a petition filed for them and now they
No,
want
they
another
registered with
company?
company A. They registered with company A, didn't get selected, so then they moved to company B. But then company's A registration got selected in the 3rd lottery. Can company B file an H-1B petition?
How did they move to the other company? I mean, I would be
They're on
inclined to say,
OPT. They're on OPT and just moved.
oh yeah, no, then definitely once you're selected, then you're not tied to who you're currently with on OPT with. Any company that's basically put forward your registration, got it selected, they can now apply for your H-1B.
Well, the key here is that company A has to submit the petition. Company B can't just take over
Right.
company A's selection. So that if you have moved, so if you didn't get selected in round 1, changed employers, but then get selected in round 2 or 3, that selection is tied to the original employer who submitted
Right.
it. So that means you would have to be willing to go back to company A, and then company A submits your petition. Now, once the petition's approved and we get to October 1st, company B could then file a change of employer and try to bring you back. But the key is that those selections are tied to the employer who registered you. So it's not tied to the individual. Again, going back to who registers, not you, the company registers. So registration is tied to the employer. So if you again change jobs and then get selected in the 3rd lottery, well, then you're going to have to be willing to go back to employer A. Again, if you get approved with employer A and then October 1st comes, you could then file a change of employer and move that H-1B to the new employer after 10-1 usually. So it is tied to the employer who submits the registration no matter what round you get selected. And so if somebody gets selected all of a sudden in March in round 4, they may have left that employer 8-9 months ago. But guess what? You're gonna have to be willing to go back to them at least for a little while. When I say go back, if they're willing to file it for you, you don't have to technically go back until 10-1. But then again, what employer is going to want to file an H-1B petition for you if you're not going to come back to work for them right now? But anyway, here is the million-dollar question. Are there likely to be any changes to this process this year?
This year,
This year.
just looking at the date on the calendar, I would say no. I would say unlikely.
Well, first, the Trump administration had proposed a change. They submitted a rule and it got challenged in court and it got kind of tossed out. And then the Biden administration formally withdrew it. That would have been the one that would have likely have gone into effect in time in order to impact this year's registration. But that rule is gone. They have proposed a new rule, but we're not even going to like see it published or even see the text of it until May, at least May of this year, meaning it is in no way going to impact this year. And that is called, the rule is called Modernizing H-1B Requirements and Oversight and Providing Flexibility in the F1 Program. I love the names they give these things. But anyway, it's going to actually touch on a bunch of different things involving H's, F1, F1 OPT, cap gap. But in regards to the registration process, all we know is this one line, and it says, bolster the H-1B registration process to reduce the possibility of misuse and fraud in the H-1B registration system. What that's going to be, we have no idea because we won't see the text until May. But the important thing is it's not going to impact this year. It could be something as simple as just we're going to raise that $10 fee to like $500, right? Because hey, who has 500 times 20 to register someone a bunch of times, right? 10 times 20 is not as big of a deal as 500 times 20. And maybe that will cut it down. And there could be something in there where they, maybe try to limit the number of registrations per person. I don't know. I just see that being challenged. But again, it's not going to impact this year. We haven't even seen the text of the rule yet to know what the proposed change is, and we probably won't see it until about May. And then, aside from rulemaking, there is a class action lawsuit that was filed. Lou v. Mayorkas. Mayorkas is, the director of DHS, the secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, which is over USCIS, who does all this. It's a class action lawsuit, right? A bunch of people who weren't selected, and who only registered one time, right, are suing, saying that this whole registration scheme is unlawful for a variety of reasons. One being legally, they're arguing that there should only be allowed one registration per person, period, even if it's different companies, just by the text of the law. So there's like a legal argument, and there's kind of an equities argument where they're saying like, hey, when you went through your rulemaking process, you got all these comments about, hey, they're going to abuse it this way, and you just ignored those comments, and you should have known better, and you should have taken more steps to try to protect this program, and you didn't. I highly, highly, highly doubt this case is going to impact this year's registration. Why? I mean, because the case was filed last year, but these things move slowly. The plaintiffs filed a motion for summary judgment this month in January of 2022. The government filed a cross motion for summary judgment on, I think, the 21st of January. Obviously, they're not going to grant summary judgment. I mean, they're probably going to have to go to the full briefing and trial and all that, which is going to take forever. An interesting side note here is there was a party who recently filed a motion to intervene on behalf of the government, meaning they're supporting the government's position in keeping this rule. And it was IT Serve Alliance. Andrew, who are IT Serve Alliance?
I mean, their biggest thing is that 2 years ago, I think at this point, they were responsible for going up against a lot of the Trump era H-1B RFEs and how those were structured. But basically, if I recall, it's just a group of IT companies that have gotten together for specifically things like this, issues that are affecting immigrant dependent companies more or less.
Well, it's a industry group for all of these IT companies. I mean, if you just go look at who it is, it's 100% Indian, and so it's very much all of these Indian IT companies got together and formed, an industry group. Obviously, and industry groups do a lot of stuff, and part of that's like lobbying and stuff like this. And yeah, and of course they had sued the government previously, and they got a huge win in regards to getting the government to rescind a bunch of memos, and these memos were specifically used to attack IT outsourcers, which are who these companies are. Um, and that was where the highest rate of denials were within IT outsourcers, and they got there was a settlement. You can go look it up. The IT service settlement, it was a big deal, and then eventually the Biden administration formally withdrew all those memos. So here they are fighting the good fight, but then suddenly now here they are backing the government. Um, there's we can kind of, I haven't seen their actual motion, but I know part of it's financial. They're just saying, hey, this registration system saves us a bunch of money, um and that's a true statement. um but on the other hand, these are also the same guys that are probably involved the most in the fraudulent duplicate registrations, and they like that because it improves the odds for their people. So there's a little bit of like, hey, I have a legitimate reason for backing the government, but I also have a little bit of an illegitimate reason for backing the government. Um, but I just thought it was interesting to see IT Serve Alliance, who had done a lot of good work going after the government, suddenly here they're on the side of the government. Um, but the key is that the registration system this year, pretty confident, is not going to change. So you're going to register in March. It's going to be a $10 fee. There's probably going to be 309 to 350,000 registrations. I think it's going to go up as more and more people realize they can get away with the duplicate registration. Um, and we're probably going to have 3 or 4 lotteries again this year. Again, for next year, there's this rules coming out. There's this case. There will probably be changes between now and next year's cap. But for this year's cap, I don't see any major changes happening on time. Now, if you are interested in this and you need further information, reach out to our office, right? You can call, you can go online to our website where you can actually book a consultation to talk to us. Uh, we do talk a lot with individual employees that are just looking for more information. Obviously, we talk to the employers who are looking for help on how to do this. We deal with corporate clients that have sophisticated HRs that deal with this all the time and have processes set up for it. And we deal with a lot of smaller companies that have never dealt with this before, but they got this really great employee that they, hired straight out of school on OPT, and they really want to keep them. And we really have to kind of walk them through the step by step of how this happens. So we deal with both in terms of people that kind of know what they want, and the people that we really have to kind of show them the ropes. But in either case, what we do is, in regards of registration, is we look at the case, we look at the employee, we look at the job offer, and we try to give the employer feedback as to, this is what we think the job code is going to be, this is what we think the prevailing wage is going to be. And then if the employer is on board, we go ahead and help them register. So we do charge a fee for that, a smaller reduced fee to help with the analysis and registration. And then if selected, then we charge to help prepare and file the full H-1B application, which not only includes all the forms to USCIS and putting everything together and support letters, but we also have to first submit what's called an LCA, which goes to the Department of Labor. There's multiple steps. I would definitely say, if you are selected, don't try to go it alone. I mean, we had a guy that came to us this year who was an attorney, got selected the previous year, tried to go it on their own, screwed it up, got denied, got selected again, then came to us and we got it approved. Do you necessarily need an attorney in order to register? I mean, no, it's pretty straightforward. What we provide is the employers that analysis to know what they're getting into ahead of time. But do you absolutely need an attorney? Probably not. I mean, it's not that difficult, just the mechanics of the registration. But if you do get selected, you want help or have questions, let us know. We're here. This is what we do all day, every day. I think we're pretty good at it. We can help get those H-1B petitions approved. If you're interested in the sort of the more of the mechanics of the H-1B in itself and how you qualify and what you need and what's a specialty occupation, go look through our backlog of videos. We have a whole video where we just go into the mechanics of what's an LCA, what's a specialty occupation, all of this of qualifying and applying in the forms. You have a whole full breakdown on that. Andrew, any last words, comments, thoughts on the upcoming H-1B cap season?
It's all about planning. So just remember that we're coming into the deadline month of March. You're going to want to be ready to go with your employer. So February is really the time to be having those conversations, doing your interviews, whatever you need to do to prepare.
And look, and if your employer's on the fence about this, you can just tell them, hey, look, the cost to register is only $10. So, hey, what do you lose, right? Because before, in order to even get into the lottery, you had to submit a full application, pay all the legal fees, cut checks for all the filing fees. So just the barrier to entry to just get into the lottery was thousands of dollars and way higher. And this may be the last year in which the barrier to entry is $10. So you can go back to your employer and say, look, why not register me? Because yeah, the odds are low, which means I want to get as many shots as I can. So even if you have STEM OPT and you can be here for a total of 3 years, I mean, if your odds are 15%, you're going to want to make sure you get 3 bites at the apple and you want to get in there as early as possible. And you can kind of go back to your employer and say, hey, well, look, you're only going to have to shell out the big bucks if I get selected. And the barrier to entry to the lottery is super low. So that's always, the argument you go back to your employer. And again, if the employer is skeptical, like, I don't know, blah, blah, then say, hey, there's an attorney you can talk to. They can give you a breakdown of the process, the costs, and we can help walk them through it, show them that it's not as scary as it may seem if you have the right help and the right team at your side. Anyway, go to our website, check us out, book a consultation if you're interested. Also download our app, Law Pilot Guardian. It's free. You can get it on Android or iOS. It's got a lot of great free features in there, and of course we're always adding features, integrating more, trying to integrate more stuff with our case management software. So that's an app that's just going to keep getting better and better. But anyway, stay tuned. You keep watching our videos. We've done videos on pretty much all the non-immigrant visa classifications. So if there's something you're interested in there, J's, L's, H's, there's a video. We're working on the green card, the employment-based immigrant categories. We've done a couple, and we're going to keep going. So hopefully, if you're interested at all, whether it be a visa or a green card through employment, that will have a video for you. But until then, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching this video, and we hope to hear from you. Thank you.